Everybody, it's nice to be here with you. This particular module is one which is interesting to me because I don't have many people requesting this particular module, and it concerns me because a lot of our money issues are related to debt. So let's get into the module to learn how we can limit our debt and or how we can immediately extinguish it or get rid of it. So next slide. Juanita?
Can you see it? Because I see what is that. Can you see it?
No, it didn't move.
All right. Let me try again.
Okay.
Okay. All righty. Let's see. Share screen. Can you see it now?
I can see number one, but I can't see the next one.
How about now?
Nope.
Huh. All right. Because it's showing on mine.
Huh. That's odd. We've never had that before. Let's see. Maybe if I click now, I can see.
How about now?
Okay, now I can see it.
Perfect.
All right. So what is debt? Let's get right into it. Next slide is our key takeaway, which is understanding your debt is the first step to managing it. So before we get into this, are there any participants out there who are interested in getting rid of debt? And you can.
Absolutely.
Good. All right.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely.
All right, let's go. Okay, next slide. So what's the difference between credit and debt? Can anybody tell me what they think the difference is between the two? Anybody?
Debt is what you owe.
Right.
Credit is what you earn. In a
credit
way.
is what's given to you. You're very good. Very good. Yes, credit is what's given to you, and debt is what you owe. All right. So let's go into it. I'll talk a little more about the next slide because it's going to let you know that debt is not the same as credit. Debt, as Amanda mentioned, is money that you owe. Credit is the ability to borrow money. And we use credit oftentimes to borrow money, which likely, I put the word in there specifically, likely becomes our debt. Because a lot of times we get credit and our intent is to pay it off and do something. But a lot of times it ends up becoming our debt. All right, next slide. So, debtors and creditors. What's the difference between a debtor and a creditor? Who can answer that for me? Jonesy?
I think a debtor is someone who owes money, and a creditor is someone who's trying to get money from somebody.
Yes.
I'm not quite too sure.
Very good. You're right. You're spot on. The difference between a creditor and a debtor is the creditor is lending you money, and the debtor is the person who's wanting the money from the lender. Very good. Next slide. So it confirms what we just said, that debtors owe money to creditors or lenders. Debtors owe the money that they borrowed, creditors and lenders loan money. Next slide. So understanding your debt, these are things you guys really need to know. You need to know who it is that you owe money to. You need to know how much money you owe to that particular company or to that particular credit card lender. You need to know how much the payments are each month that you got to pay. And it is more important for you to always know when those payments are due, because you can mess up your credit if you don't meet that payment due date. And how many payments you'll ultimately pay over time before the debt is PIF. Can anybody tell me what they think PIF stands for?
Paid in full.
Paid in full. Very good. Yes, was paid in full. And a lot of times people will look at the first 1, 2, 3, 4 things, and they will know how much who they owe, how much they owe monthly. They'll know their payment dates, but they don't always know the totality of how much they're paying when you factor in interest and fees and everything. So I would encourage you going forward, if you don't already do this, when you're getting a loan, make sure you read everything about that loan, and particularly make sure you have a clear understanding of, by the time you finish, how much money you really are going to pay, not just that monthly payment. Because psychology wise, if it's a monthly payment and it's like $200 or $100, we're cool with that. But when we look at the totality of how much we've paid, we may take a step back and not desire to have that fancy thing that we're paying on for so long. So just keep that in mind. Before you sign the dotted line, take the time, it doesn't take you long, to look at the total amount that you'll ultimately end up paying for that particular purchase. And I guarantee you'll start making different decisions as we move forward. Next slide. So debt is often used for all of these things: purchasing assets, paying bills, covering unexpected expenses or emergencies, and buying something we want or need. The one that bothers me the most is the one around covering unexpected expenses or emergencies. Using debt to cover unexpected expenses or emergencies. Why do you think that's one that really kind of gets my goat? Anybody have an idea?
So is debt a credit card?
Debt could be, no, debt doesn't have to be a credit card. Debt could be, you could be indebted to your grandfather who loaned you money. So debt itself is just the money that you owe someone. Got it?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So the reason I am uncomfortable with this, we buy debt to purchase assets. We buy debt. I mean, we have debt to purchase assets. We may use it to pay bills. We use it to cover unexpected expenses or emergencies. And we buy things that we want and need with it. But my point for you all is, and you've been in some of the sessions that Ms. Juanita and I have had with you, if you have a little emergency amount saved, then you don't have to get yourself into debt when you have an emergency. So I'm tying this back to another session where we talked about our savings and spendings plan and how we need to set aside in our spending plan a line item for emergencies. Because as my granny would say, the one thing you can surely count on in life is that you will have emergencies, and you do need to be prepared for them. So that's why I say it bugs me when I realize how much money we all have had to pay for an emergency. If we stop and think about setting up a emergency allotment for things like the car repairs and things like that, we will be better equipped and we won't have to spend so much using debt. So let's go to the next slide. So how debt can adversely affect your financial situation. It can do so by obligating our future income. This is the future money. We're using future income to pay our debt. So let's say you got some debt and then you get a promotion. Well, you might not feel that promotion because you're so much in debt. You got to use that future money, that income you just got, which was future, to pay off the debt. Generally, you're going to pay interest, and a lot of times you're going to pay fees until that debt is paid in full, which is why I said previously, make sure you know what you're getting into before you sign the dotted line. Also, this can impact how fast you're able to achieve your other financial goals. Saving money, buying a home, purchasing a car. When you go out to get a home, they're going to look at how much debt you have. And they're going to make the mortgage lender is going to make the decision as to what you can afford and not afford. So eliminating debt is your best option. So let's go to the next slide. So here's a slide that when you receive this from Miss Juanita, you should definitely do this at home on your own. It's a very easy breakdown for you when you get to it to indicate who you owe money to. This is what I would refer to as a reality check. If you can complete this exercise, this is your first step to financial freedom. So you want to do this one and you want to take the time to get it right. Because once you know how much you owe and where you have to put your money, then you'll be more successful. So it's who you owe money to, the total amount that you owe is very simple, the payment amount, and that's the going to be your monthly payment and your payment due date and the interest rate. Okay. Any questions before we move on? All right. So I'm going to encourage you guys to really take a look at this if you owe any debt at all. Oops. Okay. Next slide, Ms. Juanita. All right, so remember our key takeaway. Understanding your debt is the first step to managing it, the first step. So you're not going to get out of debt unless you focus on it. Next slide. How debt works. Next slide. We're going to learn how debt works. Consider how debt works so you can make informed decisions about debt. So that is to say, there has come a time, I think, for just about all of us, except for, maybe even multimillionaires. I remember when Donald Trump had to restructure debt. So it could be all of us. Consider the fact that you're going to have, at some point, to probably get debt for something. Let's say buying a house or a car, whatever. You need to have informed decisions. That's why I'm encouraging you to read the bottom line on anything you sign up for, particularly when it comes to monthly payments or whatever. You want to know what's the end amount I'm ultimately going to incur. Next slide. So this is debt lingo. Debt lingo. Anybody know what lingo is or think they know? We're all family here, so don't be shy. Amanda, you think you know what lingo is?
Words.
Yeah.
Words, how you speak, words.
Right, exactly. So this is a debt lingo, debt language. It's short for language. So debt lingo 1, a loan with collateral is used so the lender can take the collateral if your loan is not repaid according to the term of the loan agreement. And it talks about A, B, C. First is principal. So you need to know these terms. Amanda was correct. This is terminology, and you need to know it if you're going to be using credit and borrowing. So principal is simply the amount that you borrow. Okay, so if you're going out there, you're getting that beautiful Toyota that's, I don't know, maybe $14,000, and that's how much the car costs. That's your principal. Secured loan means you've got to put up something to get that car or whatever it is you're buying. So most people will put a down payment, but there's something else others will do with that when they get that loan, particularly a car loan. Anybody know what they typically do to get a car loan when they go into the dealer? If they don't have a down payment, what will they use in lieu of the down payment?
The car dealership will finance their finance options. Like
Yeah,
loans.
but that's not what you're close, but that's not what they use. Anybody know what people will do?
You mean
They'll
like
trade
a
in?
lender?
What was that?
Trade-in?
A lender?
Trade in. Thank you,
You're welcome.
Sylvia.
Oh,
Yes,
okay.
trade
My
in.
bad.
Yes, yes, they would trade in. And so that's the security. It's the collateral. They're giving something up. What about annual percentage rate? It starts with an I. What is our annual percentage rate? We talked about this a little bit.
Interest.
Right. It's the interest. It's the rate that you'll pay to borrow for that item you want. Okay, so we have our principal, we have our secured loan, which we have to put something down in order for the lender to give us that thing we want. That means the loan is secured. And if you put your, you put your down payment, you're gonna lose it. If you put your previous car or something, you're just out. Okay. All right. Next slide. Lingo 2. How much money you borrow. So we have principal, interest, and fees. So which of the three is the money that we borrow? Is it A, B, or C? Jonesy?
Is it A?
Yes, it's the principal is the money that you borrow. Absolutely correct. Next slide. The main cost of borrowing money? What's the main cost of borrowing money? Where do you think lenders make their money? I've had this discussion with you guys quite a few times. Is it A, B, or C?
B.
B. It's that interest. That's where, particularly those car dealers, I tell you, they make a lot of money off of us on that interest. All right, next slide. Debt lingo number 4. A credit agreement may allow you to borrow money from time to time up to a pre-approved maximum credit line. Okay, so a credit agreement may allow you to borrow money from time to time up to a pre-approved maximum credit line. And that pre-approved maximum credit line could be, is likely going to be a installment loan. Okay, you'll have to pay that loan every month. All right. Revolving credit is when you are offered a certain amount of money, and as you pay down the money, then they will add more credit. So it's revolving. And a lease agreement is just what it is. You're renting something or you're leasing something, and you got to pay monthly payments on that item. Next slide. Lingo 5, the total cost of credit on a yearly basis. So these are the things that you have to factor in when you go to get credit, which is your annual fees, the annual adjustment, and the annual percentage rate. So the total cost of credit on a yearly basis, you've got fees, and an annual adjustment could be anything that that particular lender is requiring you. Maybe it's a fee after a certain period of time that you have to pay. An annual percentage rate, remember, is the interest rate that you're going to pay every month. So that's the debt lingo there, the annual fees, annual adjustments, and the percentage rate. Next slide. So let's talk about these three. Debt lingo number 6. When you borrow a specific amount of money and repay it over a set period of time, for example, to purchase a car, you can have revolving credit. Okay? So with the revolving credit, you, as I mentioned earlier, will get a certain amount. And as you use that amount down, lenders love to do this. As you are whittling down how much you owe them, then you'll get a phone call saying, you know, we bumped you up to, now you can purchase up to $20,000 versus $10,000. That's revolving credit. What's principal mean for us? Anybody remember what the principal means? It's the amount you what?
Oh,
Oh,
Who was that? Sylvia?
yes, the amount you owe.
The amount you borrow, yes, the amount that you owe, right. And the installment loan, how do we pay that back?
Mhm.
Pay that over time, because our installment loans are those loans that we have where we're paying monthly and we're paying pretty much the same payment every month. That's an installment loan. Okay, let's go to debt lingo number 7. Which one is a loan with no collateral? Sylvia?
Secure loan.
B.
Unsecured
Unsecured.
loan.
Oh.
That is correct. Unsecured loan. Very good. The secured loan is the one with collateral.
Collateral, yeah.
Very good. Next slide. Installment loans. So now we're going to dig a little deeper. So remember we said installment loans, the amount that you borrow, there's a term set along with it. So that's how long you have to repay the principal and pay the interest. And generally, you will pay the same amount every month unless there's a variable or adjustable interest rate involved. The thing I want you to know from this slide, if you don't get anything else, stay far away from those variable or adjusted interest rates. More often than not, they don't serve us well. But I don't know what Ms. Juanita thinks about that. Okay.
I believe you, and I'm all in with that.
All
They're
right.
not good at all.
Very good. I wanted some endorsement.
True.
All right. Next slide. So revolving credit, right? So revolving credit limit, the most you can borrow, okay? Payment based on the credit that you have already used, and the minimum payment is often 1% to 5% of the outstanding balance. So you pay more, you pay off sooner, you pay less interest. All right. Next slide. Fees. This is what kills us. A lot of times we don't know the fees and we don't know enough about the penalties associated with us not meeting one of the terms of an agreement. So you want to focus on those fees because they are additional charges which don't have anything to do with the interest. So this is telling you the lender is getting the interest and some additional fees. You can count on that. Make sure that you understand before you sign the dotted line the fees you will be charged, and the fees you may be charged. Okay, so there's some definite fees in that agreement around what they're going to charge you and when. But then if you don't comply or follow through with the terms of that agreement as to when you're supposed to pay and how much you're supposed to pay, they can tack on other charges, and which are fees. Penalty fees is what I refer to them as. Okay, so be careful. Next slide. Early repayment of all or part of a loan reduces interest costs, may mean an earlier payoff date. Now, everybody would think, well, if I'm paying it early, that's a good thing, right? Be careful. Lenders oftentimes will have a fee or prepayment penalty. So make sure that, I'm going to sound like a broken record. Jonesy, what do you make sure that you do before you sign a dotted line?
Understand what you're signing.
Right, understand what you're signing. Absolutely. Ask if there are any fees and or penalties associated with prepayment. Okay, because sometimes that does occur. Next slide. Remember the key takeaway. Consider how debt works so you can make informed decisions about it. It sounds like you guys have a good understanding, so you should be able to make informed decisions. Next slide. Here's the kicker, reducing debt. All right, next slide. So in order to reduce debt, it's similar to what I've talked to you all about in terms of making sure that you have a savings and spending plan. And the reason I'm saying that is because you need to know where all your money's going. And you can't really figure out how much little extra you have to apply to reduce your debt if you don't have a spending plan, or your home, the amount you spend for housing, the amount you spend for food, the amount you spend on cable, telephone, utilities, church tithes and offerings, whatever. You need that. And if you have that, then you can start figuring out how you can, in fact, start reducing your debt, because you will know, well, I've got $10, $20, $30, $40 left a month. I can apply this towards my debt. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yes.
All right. So the key takeaway is develop a plan to reduce your debt and get help if needed, such as from a trained credit counselor. I'm going to always recommend a HUD-approved housing counselor in this space because, number one, they won't charge you, and number two, you know that they've been vetted by the United States Department of HUD, and so they are good folks. Next slide. Don't go out here to these shysters trying to have them help you reduce your debt. 2 strategies for reducing debt. These are going to be interesting, and it would be helpful if others that have a different viewpoint jump in. But here are the 2 strategies that you can pick from when you're trying to think through how you're going to start reducing your debt. So one is the high cost debt first method. All right. That's first, pay off debt that's costing you more. All right. That's the one with the highest interest rate, let's say, or the highest fees. The second is the snowball method. First, pay off debt with the lowest balance. So, Amanda, which one would you prefer? Because everybody has their own preferences, not one is right or wrong. So, Amanda, which one would you prefer if you had debt and you needed to pay it off?
I probably would do the lowest first,
Okay.
you know, but some may do the highest because
Yeah.
they feel like that's the easier. You get rid of the one thing that is the most, giving you the most problems, versus
Right.
getting rid of the easier things. But if you can make a payment plan or something with that one that's the most, and then pay the other one off, it's however you choose. But I would choose probably the snowball,
Okay. All
depending
right.
on what my money is looking like.
All right. Anybody else would rather choose the high cost debt? Because it's up to a person's personal preference. Yes, that was Miss Juanita.
I kind of do both.
Okay.
When I had to get out of debt, what I did was I looked at all the highest interest rate debt that I had, and then tackled the lowest balance on those
Mhm.
until we came down from those, and then started working on the lower interest rate debt.
Okay. That's why I like to pose this question, because it really is, as Amanda and um, everybody's been saying, is that it's a personal preference. But when I did it, I did the lowest balance. And the reason I did the lowest balance first is because I needed something to help me feel good. And so when I could knock that first one out, it just gave me a feeling, even though I knew in my mind that the highest cost one made sense, I started with the lowest one and eventually got out of debt. But Miss Juanita is 100% correct. When you start with the highest debt, you are paying off those interest rate, high interest rate debts, and you are saving a little more money. But for me, I needed the win, the quick win. All right. So let's go into them as to how we can tell you more about how to use them. So the high cost debt first method is, the advantage is you're going to save money, but your progress might feel slow. And my husband will tell you I'm like the most impatient person in the world. So that's why I use the other one. But if you're comfortable with your progress being just a little slower, like Miss Juanita, who is very patient, you can. This is for you, because you will reduce the outlay of expenses, because you'll be getting rid of those credit cards or things or debts that have a high interest rate tied to them. So the first thing you want to do if you're using this method is you want to list your debts. You have the example in the deck. When Miss Juanita sends it, it's the example I talk you through that I said you guys want to work through. So you have that to work with. The next thing you want to do is pay the amount that's due on each debt. All right, that's every debt you have. You want to meet that obligation monthly. The third thing, you want to make the extra payment to the first debt. That's where you start making that extra payment. After you've paid off one debt, you want to make that extra payment to the first debt. After you finish paying the whole first debt off, you want to make your money that you were paying for that debt, you want to add it to the next highest cost, okay, debt. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah.
All right. So what I want you to do is try that when you get home. I want you to work through those exercises. Next slide, because we're going to talk about the second way. This is the quick win method. So this is for people who are impatient like me, and you need a little more encouragement and a little more push to get rid of all that debt. So here they also call it the snowball method. I'm sorry, Miss Money. They also call it the snowball method. So the advantage is it makes progress seem faster, but the disadvantage is you're going to pay a little more money for it. I chose making the progress faster over me getting discouraged. And so you got to think about that, as we've discussed. So you're going to do the same thing. You're going to list those debts, but you'll just start with your lowest balance to the highest. And then you're going to pay amount due on the smallest debt, debt one. Maybe debt one is only $100 and maybe you got $100 for Christmas. So bam, one debt is out. You feeling good. Next, you want to go and pay off the first debt and make that extra payment that you have. You want to add that to the next debt. So that's just a way that you do that. Next slide. All right, so this is giving you an example of the high cost method worksheet, which Miss Juanita said, she preferred to use, and you can see why here. If you have a credit card that's $8,000 at 14% interest, you're trying to lower that if you are picking the high cost debt. And then the second one is the hospital, and the last would be the bank, because you're focused on those interest rates. So that's how you're going to pick the card if you that you're going to pay off, or the thing, or the company you owe, by using the high cost debt. Let's go to the next slide. So with the Snowball, notice the one that I use is I would have paid that bank car loan off, that $2,000 off first, because that would make me feel good quicker, versus taking the time to pay the hospital debt, which is the higher one. So it's up to you what works for you. The key that Miss Juanita and I want you to know is just pick the one that works for you and stick with it, because our goal is to get you out of debt. Okay? Next slide. Where to get help. This is one of the most important slides in this presentation, because there are so many companies out there trying to tell you what they can do for you for a fee. And my position is, if you can read and write, you can do most of it yourself. And if you need help, there are agencies out here, for instance, nonprofit free credit counseling organizations, HUD-approved housing counselors. They get vetted by the U.S. Department of HUD, and we give them our stamp of approval. So you can find out where these counselors are in your area by going to HUD.gov, and you can segregate the counselors by what you need. If you need housing counseling, they have those. If you need credit counseling, they have some that specialize in credit counseling, and you can find online where they are near you. The other thing that you can do is go to USA.gov and just search for credit counseling. They will give you accredited folks that they feel comfortable with, the United States government feel comfortable with. And then I said, FYI, you can also find tips from the Federal Trade Commission on how to find and choose a credit counselor as well. So they will, if you get a company, maybe let's say you get a phone call and, oh, this lady sounds so nice and everything sounds good, you might want to go check FTC, the Federal Trade Commission's website, to see what they have to say about that individual, or about the way that they approached you, or things that they communicated to you as to what they can do for you. So those are just resources, and they're federal resources. So hold on to this slide when you get your deck from Ms. Juanita. Next slide.
Just an FYI, I am a HUD-approved housing counselor for those that are online. Okay.
All right. So you guys got help right there in your neighborhood. Should I get help? I think I spelled this correctly, but it's one of the few words that I remember in Spanish as an old lady. CUIDADO. Be careful.
Yep.
Be careful. Debt settlement companies, they offer to make deals with your creditors, ask about their fees and process. I personally would avoid them. I think you can do it on your own. You have the information here, and you have Miss Juanita. Debt consolidation loans, same thing to me. Why am I consolidating? I still have to pay the money. But there's some people that do that. It's not something that I would recommend. I would say follow one of those two paths that we talked about earlier as to how you can get out of debt. But there are debt consolidation companies. The reason you see the symbol up here is because this, the FDIC is telling you to be very careful. So that's a warning for you. All right, next slide. Key takeaway: develop a plan to reduce your debt and get help if needed, such as from a trained HUD-approved credit counseling agency, of which you have. Next slide. So here's where we get into deeper poop: non-payment of debts and debts in collection. So I'm going to say to you, don't be distressed if you're in this scenario. I've been there and you can get out of it. So let's go into this. Next slide. The key takeaway: whatever you do, don't ignore the debt collector. Even if you have a home and you can't pay your mortgage, don't ignore the mortgage company. People are more likely, I find, to assist you if you work with them and if you're truthful. So don't ignore the debt collector. Make sure any debt that you're asked to pay is valid as soon as possible. Sometimes you may get something you don't remember. This doesn't sound right. Make sure that you get validation, okay? They can send you what it was you signed. Remember, I talked about signing on a dotted line. They can send you that contract information. The reason I say this is important is because today everybody's doing so much. People are moving fast. It could be a mistake. It might be the name was wrong. It could be another file somebody had for you. So just make sure before, if you get a debt collector calling you, make sure it's something that you remember and it is for you, and then ask to see the information so that you can compare it with your information to make sure the amount is correct and all those things. So, and also get help if you need it. Next slide. So there's a life cycle of debt when it isn't current. So we take on the debt, maybe we miss some payments, we're now delinquent. We go from being in default when we're severely delinquent. Normally you're in default after 2 missed payments, okay? Then if you ignore the debt collectors after you're in default over a period of time, it becomes a charge-off. So 6 months or more, likely it becomes a charge-off. Now you're in collections assigned or sold to a debt collector, and Bank of America is not working with you anymore. After you get to charge off, now they're paying a company to pound you on the head and be nasty and do these things. Typically, that's what they do to try to get you to pay, okay? Because they make money. Next slide. Not paying debts. What can happen if you don't pay your debts on time and as agreed? Next slide. Well, we just talked about some of it. Several things that can happen if you don't pay your debts. Late fees or more money in interest is just gonna rack up. I'm telling you, it is utterly ridiculous. Even if you can't pay everything or the total amount, try to put down something, because this is where folks look to make money. You're going to get contacted by a debt collector. Nobody wants to get those phone calls. You can lose services. You're going to end up paying costs to reestablish them. If it's like a utility company, then they're going to add an extra fee because they're concerned that we can't pay. And you could lose collateral. We've talked about this quite a bit, so I don't have to go into that. So you understand that. If you have a mortgage and a house and you get too far behind, you could potentially lose your collateral, which is the home. Next slide. So we don't want you going there. What else can happen? Obviously, the negative entries on your credit reports, the dip in your credit score, your FICO score, that most of us look at. Lawsuits from creditors, it can get ugly. Wage garnishment, you don't want to go there. Account garnishment, yes, that means your savings or checking account, you don't want to go there. And treasury offset, that's when you have a refund that's coming back to you after you file taxes for the year. Treasury will take their money. Okay. And they never, even if it's student loan or something, they never ever forget it. They always have it on record. Next slide. Debt collectors must follow rules. This is a really good one for you guys. Make sure you hold on to it and share it with some of your family members, because I used to in HUD, I used to work with contractors that were debt collectors for the agency when I was young, and those guys would do all kinds of stuff. I'd get so many complaints, it would just drive me crazy. And I had to put my foot down with them and threaten to fire a few of those companies if they didn't knock it off, because they would tell people, we're going to come to your house and take your car, or we're going to come to your house and lock the door, you won't be able to get in. They were doing all kinds of things. But debt collectors must follow rules. They're not to be abusive, unfair. They're not to use deceptive practices to scare us. They can't call you at work if you told them not to call. If there's a time or place that's inconvenient for you, you can let them know that. They're not supposed to threaten violence. They're not supposed to be obscene, nasty, use nasty, ugly language. So you want to report problems with debt collectors, okay? And there is information online that will help you with that. But you have Miss Juanita and others there to help you as well. So that's the thing I want you to know about debt collectors, because they do get ugly. I do know this. Next slide. So we're at the end, and this is our key takeaway that you want to remember about these debt collectors. First, you don't want to ignore them. And secondly, you want to make sure that any debt you're asked to pay is valid as soon as possible. So make sure that it's a valid debt that belongs to you. It's not something that belonged to a cousin or someone that has a name similar to yours or something like that. Get help if you need it. And I've given you information around the HUD-approved counseling agencies. So I'm open for any questions that you may have had or that you may have.
I have a question.
Sure.
I have, okay. I had a old Cox cable bill that I had paid off, and it had went to collections, and then I had paid it off. But then when I paid it off, I had the receipt and everything. And I can't remember if I thought I took a picture of it, and saved it in my phone, but it's still, I paid it already, but I know that when I call to the credit bureaus to let them know that I paid it, they're going to want a receipt or something. So how can I find my receipt, so I can show them that I paid it,
So how did you pay it?
I think it may, it may be still in my bank account. I know that's one way I can go back into my bank account.
If you paid it electronically through your bank, you can find it that way. If you paid it via check, you can find it that way through your banking institution as well. If you paid it with a United States Postal Service,
I think I paid it through my debit card through my bank.
okay.
So
You
I
can
may
go to your bank and you know the date, because you're gonna have to know the date, or at least a range of time that you would have paid it.
That's a good question. That's what I don't even remember.
So you didn't hold on to anything at all?
I don't even remember. I thought I did. That means I have to go look,
Go
so that's what
look.
I've been struggling with, trying to figure out, well, I can't, they're not going to have a record of it. So I'll have to figure it out, but I'll figure it out though. I'm gonna get on it.
Is,
Though.
is the amount high now that they want?
No, I already paid it off. It's already been paid.
No, I thought you were saying that they were still telling you to pay more money or reaching out.
No,
to you.
they weren't. No, they're not telling me to pay more money. I just need to,
You
once
just want to have something in your files. Is that what you're trying to do?
yeah, so they know, because I know that when I contact the credit bureau, they're going to ask me, do you have proof? They're going to want to see proof.
Right. That is correct.
Do you
Well,
do banking online, Amanda?
Yeah, I think I'm like thinking in my head, like I think I may have used my debit card. So, and if I did, then it's in my account. Yeah, it's in my account. So I'll find it. But that's all I had.
Okay,
Yeah.
good for you.
What I've done in the past, Amanda, when I've had to help somebody do that, is ask them to remember around what year it was, and then go through the bank statements that you had that year. The bank will have them on record for you to review them. And then
Right.
when you find the date and time, the date of the payment, circle it, print that particular form up, and there you have it.
Right,
Really.
right.
Mhm.
Okay.
Very good. Any more questions? That was a good one. Okay. Well, Miss Juanita, I think we had a good session. Everybody was answering questions, so I think they got what they need. She's on mute.
Yeah, that was good. Thank you, Ivory. We do have workshops coming up this week. We have a loans to avoid tomorrow, the 18th at 11.
Really good.
We have the Starbucks recruiting for our 16 to 24-year-olds in the next couple of days. Next week, we have a chemical dependency workshop on the 1st, another home buying workshop on the 23rd, protecting your identity on the 24th, and enhancing your education through skills. So that's on the 25th. Hope to see you all there. Thank you all for joining us today. I really appreciate you, Miss Ivory. You always do a wonderful job.
Sure,
Thank
thank you.
you.
And you guys have the best. You have so much there for your people. I think that is wonderful. I
We
don't have any
try.
other envision centers that I've worked with that have.
Thank you so much.
Yes,
I learned so much today.
Good, Jonesy. It's good. It's nice to see everybody, and I'll see you during the next session. Don't forget to do the exercise though when this one
won't.
hits the deck.
I'll send it out today. I'll send it out to everyone that was attending. I'll send out the exercise.
Okay, have a good one,
Thank
guys.
you. You guys have a good one.
You too. Bye.
Bye.